Just a minute.
Okay.
I tell you, I didn't. This is the only meeting I didn't print anything out.
So you snacking? What you
I
mean?
know. Well,
But you got some. You got some
Yeah, we
there.
got you, dude.
I'm just laughing because I purposely didn't print it out. And I was like, oh, but somebody else did for me.
Well, because these materials were late, so I don't have a chance to go over them. So I thought having them hard copy might be helpful.
That's right.
Are you close now?
Yes. I'm not quite yet.
Okay.
I'm almost
The
there.
Packer one needs to get in.
Okay.
Oh, a bunch more. I don't know if it needs to be a panelist.
I will be right there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for moving the order around as well.
Hey, how y'all doing today?
How are you?
Awesome.
I'm going to talk about our favorite subject.
Yes. Right on time. So we're only gonna go till, I mean, I think announced it. We're gonna go to 5 o'clock too. Because we want to get over to the Jeff, site, community event too, so.
Oh.
At least I do anyway.
I do.
Yeah. Is that Jeff?
Yes, in the library.
Town hall, and then it's the planning meeting.
That is.
They're both in this space.
Okay.
Some lighting.
Did we ever get the numbers for the Vigo piece on that?
For
Yeah. Vigo versus.
we have that. It's in the master plan. The
Oh, okay.
the
So
original master plan. Yeah. The
Okay.
original, I can send that over to you.
yeah.
Okay.
Are we waiting for anyone?
I believe you can go on. Kara's going to come back in a second. She just needs to know who needs to be a panelist versus just an attendee.
Should we wait for her or?
She's going to grab her phone.
Okay, that's fine. We can wait. Maybe then about 5 people away.
You run a meeting on time.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Just wait till you care.
Brought into the meeting.
You see a Tom Peterson or Kara. Or Kara Tirana.
Why did-
They don't need to be in now, but when it's time
Okay.
for the BAC presentation.
Okay.
Making those. Pardon?
I think that unless you need somebody from the cyber, you can start.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll get started. It's going to call to order the meeting for the Facilities and Operations Committee. We will start with introductions, starting on my right.
Hi, Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
Lisa Wheeler, Routing Manager, Student Transportation.
Nikki Nowak, Capital Planning.
Dana White, Planning and Real Estate.
Patrick Bogov, Director of Projects and Construction.
Julie Remembrance Committee.
Gary Hollins, Chair of Facilities Operations Committee.
Amy Constand, member.
Hi, and do you recollect?
And CFO.
Not yet, not until I get sworn in.
Should be split community engagement.
Dr. Martin Luther King, Vice President with PTA.
Yeah, Rosie Boyer, Martin Luther King, Treasurer.
Carol Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to do it today is we're going to rearrange the order of the agenda today. There was co-meetings that went along that talked about Harriet Tubman and Jefferson remodernization as well. So we're going to start with the Harriet Tubman piece because those folks that will want to be part of that conversation also would like to be part of the Jefferson conversation, since a lot of those are in the same minor district and really important to those same folks in that cluster. So we're going to start with that, and then we will be ending here at 5. So I apologize now for if we don't get to something by 5 o'clock. Because like myself and some other folks want to get over to the community meeting around Jefferson High School as well. So with that, I'll start with Mr. Young and go from there.
Okay, great, thanks. So in your packets, and on the board book, you should have physical copies of the due diligence, volume 3, also a copy of the presentation that's tonight that we'll add to the board book as well, but that might be handy to have a physical copy as well tonight. If you want to go to the next one, Patrick. Agenda for today, we're going to do a real quick overview of some efforts to date. We'll walk through some of the due diligence volume 3 highlights, provide an update on community engagement, and then really we're interested in hearing feedback and comments from the community members. Next one, please. This is a familiar slide. It just highlights some of the efforts, recent efforts to date, including and ending with the due diligence document for volume 3. And then the next slide is just a reference to the overall plan and where we are today in relation to that. So, perfect. Thought we would do just a quick bit of context around the site search for relocation property, and I think we can think of this effort in really 3 categories. Phase 1 was really looking for like that perfect site. And we had 3 simple criteria that we've talked about quite a bit when we first looked for potential sites. A site that's located within the existing Tubman boundary, acreage of about 6 to 9 acres, and availability. They would be available for development for the schedule. And really, the goal was to find a site that had no material trade-offs, that basically had everything that we wanted. And as we know, we did not identify any site that met all of these criteria or even substantially met. So we quickly transitioned to what we could consider phase 2, which is expanded criteria. So more criteria that we're reviewing and expanding the site search. This also changed our expectations around trade-offs, where we became aware that there were going to be some trade-offs. The goal was to keep them small and to minimize what those would be. Where I think we are right now is really approaching the end of phase 2 and moving into a phase 3 where we're going to need to be talking about and considering potentially significant trade-offs with the site options. So that's just a little bit of framing. And I think so is the next slide, yes. So these are some grounding statements that we talked about before. This is just a little bit of foreshadowing for the conversation we're going to have later about trade-offs. So I just was asking committee members to think about these as we go through our conversation today and the slides today. So I won't read them. You'll see them all there, and we'll talk about them again after we do a little bit more presentation. So we'll jump into the due diligence document, volume 3. It highlights analysis of 6 sites. So we'll walk through each one of those pretty briefly, but we'll answer questions or any comments as we go along. Then we'll have some more discussion. So, Dana?
Sure. So BESC, where we're currently sitting, has the benefit of being located within the boundary, as you know, and we already own it. It is, some of the risks around that are the successful development of this site. It's not as clean as it looks. There are multiple things going on at this site that would require some significant work. And of course, we're already here, so we would need to relocate both our warehouse operations and our office operations, and is likely pretty cost prohibitive. We will know more about that relocation when we finish that work in August, but we know that it would be very expensive for us to build or lease something else. So it's really how much can we afford to spend to do that. We do recommend continuing to analyze it. So it's on the list, and we are continuing to look at that and how that might shape out if we were to be able to do it. This you can see, I'm sorry, can you go back one? You can see where we located the building there, and that's there for a reason, because that's the farthest from the freeway, and it's also the lowest point. There's some height restrictions when you get onto the other side, and putting the field in the middle there. So it is a possibility. Sorry, next slide.
So question.
Yeah.
So how did that intertwine with the lease, the potential right of first refusal with the mentioned?
So they have a right of first offer. If we decide to sell the property, then they have the right to go first to purchase that property. If we did that, we would not be selling at least 2/3 of the property. There's, you can see that portion on the end that says available. We would probably want to sell that. And one of the things that we're looking at in the BESC 2 work is, could we do this and put our office building on there?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So we would be co-located with the school, which could be kind of cool. But you're right, then they don't have that opportunity. Okay, sorry, next one. Yeah.
The air quality was one of the main reasons that Harry told me was looking to relocate. Is the air quality here any different since it's right across the freeway?
We're definitely farther from the freeway than where Tubman currently sits. We've done some preliminary work on the air quality. We have not done extensive tests on the air quality here. So that if that were to be the one we want to go with, we would need to do more. But it is definitely farther away.
So I'm gonna just kind of piggyback on that question. So preliminary test that's done, do it show a better air quality than Tubman?
I think so. Dan, help me out.
I could
here.
say they're 2 very different tests. So the tests that are done at Tubman were done over months and some of them even years, would be the indoor air quality tests. What was done on this and a couple other sites were very quick spot tests to see if there's obvious red flags. So it's like a point in time. And there wasn't anything that said that there's a clear red flag, but more study would need to be done before.
I gotta answer your question.
Yeah, I got a follow-up question. It seems that air quality has been a major topic of discussion when it comes to our schools, and I'm all for that. But it seems like PBS in the past has really liked to build around freeways, and I wonder if I've asked this question in a different meeting, wasn't answered, but I'm wondering, are we testing all schools for air quality, or is it just Tubman?
We have the district has an environmental health and safety department that regularly monitors air quality at our schools. Tubman had specific testing because of its proximity to I-5. So before it was reoccupied, that's why that extensive testing was done there. It's not something that typically happens on places.
Benson is located right by the freeway. Lincoln is located right by the freeway. Upland Green is located right by the freeway. Have these schools been tested?
They haven't done the same amount of testing, but I'll say I think I won't speak for our health and safety department, but because they're not that close, I don't think that has the likely indicators that it's going to have these senior quality concerns.
When you say that close, what is there like?
Tubman's within 40 feet or so.
There's a freeway entry right next to Benson.
Yeah.
It's an on ramp But let's move on to this. I hear what you're saying, and that's another conversation. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So let's move on with this presentation here, and then we can kind of get back to that at another time.
Next one was Lloyd Center. And we've taken a look at this. It is a little bit out of the boundary, just slightly. It's probably very cost prohibitive. Would not probably be supported by the city or the developers in that area, not in a residential area. A lot of real estate negotiations and legal work that would need to go into that. So we decided we should not probably do any more further analysis about Lloyd Center at this time. We would be living there with construction for decades. Probably not be ideal for students. There we go. So Meek is a little bit outside the boundary, which is obviously its risk. We do own it. It is adequately sized for middle school. We could rehab it or we could rebuild there, depending on how things went. But because it's outside the Tubman boundary, we've said we would not do any more work on it. So that constraint changes the game for some locations, and that's fine.
So adequately sized means that you could accommodate our ed specs for athletic and recreation facilities at that site?
Not at 5 acres. We wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to get everything on there, but we certainly have other middle schools that are smaller, acreage wise. They're all really small.
Maybe more like Kellogg.
Or like Kellogg, which
Kellogg.
doesn't have a full size field.
Right.
Exactly. Kellogg's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, Kellogg's, just a little under 6 acres, just, that helps. The Jefferson, and I know this is a big area of consideration, that south lot is obviously in the boundary and we own it. It's very, very small. And to try to get a school on there, of course, there would be no fields or green space there. And the development of that would be pushed out until 26 at a minimum because of the Jefferson work. So it has some significant impacts to that work at Jefferson. We've looked at, could we actually squeeze something on there? Maybe is the answer. We also don't know what's underneath there, and we're working with Northwest Natural Gas to find out what's actually underneath there. We're meeting with their engineers. So right now, we've set this one aside and aren't analyzing it any further. I think we've got as far as we can go on this one at this time.
But that could work if you conjoined it with Humboldt across the street and proposed relocation for Kairos.
Yeah, well, Humboldt will be a better location for Tubman than this would be.
Well, I mean, I
Yeah,
think
we
you
have
probably
at least-
need this lot with Humboldt in order to accommodate the athletic and recreation facilities and the building.
And that is in the new law. We'll talk about Humboldt here in a quick
Okay.
second. But it says the two sites combined, they're about 5 acres. So you probably wouldn't need both of them. It would probably, I think, but to Dan's point, it'd be best if that were the scenario and it were available for development, to put the middle school on
The
the
Humboldt.
existing
Yeah.
site. That way, there's a field that could potentially be shared or some site amenities that could be shared.
But then along with that, they have a 10-year lease already. So that would be having to negotiate out that lease that they
Correct.
currently
It's,
have
oh, yeah.
for 10 years.
Be our responsibility to relocate.
To
I mean, to relocate
our-
Kairos.
Right. And so we have looked at that. We've done some drawings on that. Of course, we own it and it's in the boundary and it's close to Jeff. So those are all great things. But again, we have this lease that would need to be dealt with. So there would need to be some work done on that. So right now, we don't have any further analysis to do. We know we could fit the school. We know it goes within the boundary, but unless there's something that changes with Kairos, it's really not available to us.
So, can you go back to that for 1 second?
Yeah.
So, what is that white thing to the south?
Stay.
This
Yeah.
thing down here.
Do we own that weird little flag lot right there adjacent to Humboldt? Just an open field now?
We do. I don't know what that is.
I think that was the idea that was potentially.
Like a gym or something.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
That's
is a
right.
very oddly
very
It's a
configured
super
site.
weird.
It's got
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
25 streets that abut into it from every direction. It's development would, there's a lot of questions about what exactly would be necessary to develop that, but that's,
And
I
it's
think
very
what that
skinny.
is. Yeah, so this is
Yeah.
just conceptually, could you potentially fit something potential?
Back to the Jefferson side.
Yeah, you want to go back to Jeff?
Well, just no, a comment you made, because I thought we chased this down at one point, that it wasn't a gas line, that it was actually Pacific Power, which would be electricity,
Yeah, right.
which is very
There's
different
both.
to build on electricity versus.
Versus the
A
gas
gas.
line. So there had been a gas line there, and there used to be a big concrete circle there that is now gone. And so our question is, what's underneath there? Is there some kind of cavernous thing that might fall in? Is there anything that we need to be worried about? So that's what we're trying to determine right now. Is that if we started to dig there, what would we find?
But it doesn't appear that there's actually an active gas line.
It does not appear that we are aware of at this
Yeah.
time.
Well, I mean, because that would be,
That would be a problem.
but it's not, but there's something there that we need to.
We need to understand, they decommissioned something and it's not quite clear what it is, so we're gonna get the engineers out there, I think on the 24th and say, okay, what actually is going on here? Because you're right, on the corner, that's the electrical.
I'm sorry, can I just get a little clarification? So the reason why you're pausing is because of the unknownness of the lot at Jefferson, across the street from Jefferson? Is that why you're pausing on, or recommending to pause on Jefferson?
Are you talking about the south lot on
Yeah.
Jeff? The reason that we know that we could fit probably something on there, making it, kind of vertical. But what that would require then, some significant trade-offs for the Jefferson plan. And we need to do some more investigation on the ground there, which that's what we're doing. But I think the bigger issue is probably taking out of that from service, that no athletic fields then really for Jeff. So it's,
Or for Tubman, there'd be
Or for
virtually
Tubman.
no side amenities, no
Right.
parking.
there'd be no
Yeah.
Or
parking, no
little
green space.
bus circulation, outside space, and on a 2-acre site, that'd be, smaller than any other site that we have for middle school.
That's incredibly small.
Yeah, and the smallest we have now is Tubman, but Tubman also has a park adjacent.
And I know about some of the conversations is also being as far as co-use of the field that Jefferson's going to have as well, right? As far as the Tubman piece. So I understand that it won't be something exactly for Tubman, but if they're co-using fields and sports areas, I guess when I look at it, it doesn't necessarily have to be, they have to have their own baseball field and their own sports field and their own, if
Right.
they are co-locating with the school. And I've seen this in a couple other places here in Oregon, to where you have your middle school and you have your high school in the same facilities, and they co-use some of that space. So I think I just want to kind of get away from when we're looking at that space there, saying, well, there is no athletic facilities, as opposed to saying we have to figure out how to co-use the facilities that's going to be adjacent to them with the just piece.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And I know there's going to be challenges and all that stuff, but
I mean, the only thing I was gonna say to Gary is that would mean, we definitely have to design Jefferson to be very vertical, because it already doesn't meet ed specs in terms of athletic facilities. So if you're sharing, you need more than adequate. And we don't want to build any more high schools that don't have adequate athletic facilities.
I concur.
Yeah,
It does not work,
We
and it's
continue
been a
to
huge
shortchange.
mistake.
And when you look at co-located facilities in the Portland metro, the suburban, I mean, they're on 40, 50, 60 acres.
They're on
This
big
is-
sites. Jeff is already constrained in terms of the size for a high school. It's already a small lot. So, I mean, nothing's impossible, but
Right, I got
it is, there's a big trade-off there.
Also, just to see this right there. Jefferson, as somebody who works at Jefferson, they use the gym. don't think a middle school needs a football field. It's not a football team, the middle school football team, they're already feeder schools that feed into those. So I think them using Jefferson's athletics would be an issue.
Part of the challenge that we run into with athletics is the practices, because you have, it's not just the games, it's all of the grades that have practices, and where do we put those folks? I think if we were to develop here, we would definitely need concurrently to be planning to develop whatever, because we just would not have the space.
And or have possession of Concordia.
Something else that was,
And
Well, according to the master plan that you guys had as far as facilities, there's 2 other sites you're looking at to rebuild for sports hubs as well, right? So with those things that there is, I'm just saying as we look at everything in the totality,
right?
and I know there'd be issues as far as transportation and getting to those sites, but because we are in this limited space, when we look at those other sports hubs like at Franklin and Marshall
And Jackson.
right, Jackson, there could be other options, right, as far as looking at that space and that sports space as well. So it's not like we don't have potential options, it's just how creative we are at using options.
And what the trade-offs are, right? You know, I know at Tubman now, while they're adjacent to a park, it's a big issue not to have enough outside space for kids.
Is it like for recess or just for after school?
As for recess, they, just letting, and of course in parks, you're sharing it with the general public and you never know who's gonna be there.
So as I look at this design here, we're talking about like recess type stuff, right? Then it just seems like it's a more of a scheduling piece because high school really don't have recess, right? So as far as scheduling that type of stuff, I'm just trying to see what are we really looking for when we talk about our middle schools and the space that they need as far as for athletics and facilities outside of what they don't have, like for instance, football stuff. Middle schools don't have football, so
Right.
in football they don't have like tracks, and they usually feed into those little hubs with tracks. So it's not like they need a track, right? So I'm just trying to think of how do we really think differently about what the real use that is needed for athletic space. Maybe they may need a bigger gym or something like that. Maybe that's really what's really the need is versus this outdoor space piece. Just trying to think how we think differently about what is really needed for that space and really define what that athletic space really is as we move forward.
And Emmanuel. So this has come up in a number of conversations. We have talked to Emmanuel. They are in no way interested in selling. And this would require us to be on 2 lots crossing Graham, which is very busy street. That's their ambulance entrance and a lot of traffic through there. So it would mean kids would have to somehow cross that to go to an athletic field. And it would be, it's just very, very tight. It's really very small. So we have a lot of concerns about, well, it's not available. Let's start there. But we also have a lot of concerns about the design and safety there. So it really doesn't appear to be viable for this.
I just scratched it out.
You're scratching stuff out?
Yeah,
very dramatically too.
Yeah, I guess
Give the man a red pen.
if something is not for sale,
Right,
then we don't need to keep going down that road.
That road, yeah, I would agree with you. So I think so those are the things that we looked at most recently in this latest version. And then, Dan, did you want to speak to the chart?
Yeah, this is just intended to be an illustrative summary of the site analysis to date. This isn't a math equation, obviously. We're not going to assign numbers and whatever is the highest score is going to be the right side. It was just a way. There's a lot of language and words that are in the due diligence document. This is just a way to show graphically. We thought it might be a useful reference point, and we can come back to it during our discussion here.
Okay.
This is me.
Yes.
And so considering what we just reviewed and our sites in some of those factors and their viability. We also are acknowledging, what it's going to truly take to connect multiple communities across Jefferson and Tubman feeder schools. We really want to look at this timeline and following the summer, really think about a formal connection with the Center for Black Student Excellence in the Jefferson modernization. And I think right now we're continuing to try and hold space with the Tubman community, and that means BTSA leaders, that means students, that means families. But we ultimately now, with our updated due diligence report and information and insight on these sites, want to provide this update and transition to really having a guiding coalition structure. And so that will really help us connect all of those processes and be able to bring more of a collective conversation about what we can do with finding a site that will really work for families and students. And so that will move on to that through August and September, healing and humility phase, but really wanting to think about this guiding coalition as a space where we connect those three processes and dive deeper into a collective solution where we're all working towards that together. So I think that is where we are now, and we'll pass it back to you.
I don't think Barney has a.
Yeah, I just had a question about, so in that process, what decisions are like, so in August, I see like guiding coalition 1, and then we keep going through to the end. And then is that like, obviously it's guiding the decision we make here, but are those like, each of those sessions or whatever gonna, like, those would be the decisions made here, like, and it'll be kind of, I don't really know how to say it, but like, whatever they decide, then it'll come back and we'll be making those decisions with them and like kind of on the same level. Because I know sometimes like it's in the past, we've had issues with like community engagement coming after, or like we're having issues with like making decisions on the same timeline as we're engaging the community. So I'm just wondering whether like these timelines are going to line up in terms of when we have to make decisions for this project.
Yeah, that's the goal, really, to have that link and connection. So the Jefferson modernization, I know in the fall that the master plan is going to be voted on, and so we really are wanting to be intentional with that timing. But yeah, that decision ultimately, we want a recommendation that comes from community that the staff will then bring to the board.
To make sure I'm clear, if we're looking at the timeline for the site selection for Harriet Tubman, kind of wanted to be in line with the master planning for Jeff.
Right.
Is that to give the Jefferson community and that whole area time to look at everything in totality? So that way, if we're looking at things together, we can potentially make decisions based on both Tubman and Jeff at the same time.
What's the goal?
And that's the tricky part, because within the master planning or the design process for Jefferson, we have to engage that community and saying, do you even want to think about accommodating Harriet Tubman on this shared property, speaking broadly, including the south side of Alberta and potentially Humboldt, or not?
Yeah, but I think the thing is, I think it's the same community, right? So it's not a separate community that you're talking about. You're not talking about.
I
It's
know.
the same community, and I think because it is the same community, then have to get put on both. It just kind of just mentions that it's the same folks that are going to tell me the same folks.
So you're saying, I mean, I totally agree with that, but you're saying that you think that the master planning group for Jefferson is an appropriate place to actually do this work for Tubman?
No, I think they be part of the conversation. Yeah.
Because that process is going to move pretty quickly, because they're driving toward design documents, and so they gotta know, like, do we control the whole site? Are we sharing? You know, like, that train is gonna keep moving.
Yeah.
So good
So-
afternoon, everyone. Jonathan Garcia, Chief of Staff here. Really appreciate that conversation and that point from both of you, Director Constam and Director Hollins. I think that's right. We want, earlier, as Director Hollins was saying, I think we need to have a conversation with the same community, to Director Hollins' point, about the different projects, right? We have over $500 million invested in this community. And so part of the conversation, as you all, kind of as Dan was going through the different sites, is that, we do have to, at some point, have to have trade-off conversations within the same communities. What's happening right now is that we're having, I would call fractured conversations. Again, there's no ill intent there, but just trying to bring those into this, the same folks into the same room, talking about the same kind of area is going to be important. Now, I want to know, Director Constant, to your point, we do have deadlines, right? The master plan is moving forward, on schedule, and so what staff is trying to do is really connect these projects as artfully as possible and as quickly as possible, so that our community can really help shape that decision.
And I have another question for this one too. So in my experience, guiding coalitions are many times made up of like adults, and then if there are students involved, it's traditional schoolers. So obviously for Tubman, that's not really gonna be an option necessarily, since those are alumni at that school. So I'm wondering whether we have anything specific to students who are at Tubman right now, in terms of like, this is gonna be the school for them, and making sure that like their voices.
Yeah, they're ready to, and we've been meeting with them on an ongoing basis, but they're really ready to get into the design part of all of this. So I think they're there in terms of having a vested interest and a really central piece to it.
So we will have like targeted sessions for Tubman students.
Yes, we have and will continue to do that.
So this conversation is all for years in advance, right? Like the kids that will be at Tubman, going into Tubman, are currently in elementary school.
Yes, there's-
Alumni.
My children.
Yes.
And Tubman and at Jeff.
So you're gonna include elementary schools in this, or elementary children in this process, because they're the ones that are gonna get it.
Absolutely. We know that the first graders right now will be the first folks to come into Tubman. So that's a really key piece, right? To involve all the feeder schools.
Okay, so let's talk about next steps, and then we can kind of move on to the next thing, that we have 20 minutes left.
All right, so I think what will be really important is we have the cycle of producing the due diligence document, having conversations, community engagement, and then getting feedback and direction and producing the next version to refine viable sites. What we have in this current document is, the recommendation, and one of your feedback, that's right or not, is the BSC site is one that we should continue to reanalyze. It is a high-risk site. The other sites don't appear to be viable sites that we've identified at this time. Now, Patrick, if you want to go back to that larger matrix that we've looked at.
Are you saying none of them?
That's what I was going to try to push back a little bit on that. So I think when we're looking at, I think in manual, because they're not trying to sell it, I think that it'd just be a waste of time going after something that's not for sale. But I think as we're looking at some of these other sites, when I look at it, it says no further analysis at this time. I think we should really look at those analysis for those other sites. I think we should need the deep dive in there.
So which?
And what the other sites have in common is that we control all of them.
Well, and some of the except for Lloyd
We'll
Center.
cross that one off.
But like you said, that you're having conversations about like the gas line with Northwest National, right? So we still are looking at, still analyzing it, right? As opposed to saying, no, we're not doing for the end of it. We still are.
We're doing that for Jefferson modernization.
Right, okay.
Now, if the direction is
Right.
to continue analysis on that Jefferson Southern lot, we can continue that. Our recommendation, or our our review of this was, that's significant trade-offs.
Yeah.
It'll be impactful to the middle school, will be impactful to the high school. We're happy to do that, if that's the direction. we can do that. Are there other sites that you want to continue to look at? Because the orange really highlights the ones that, in our review.
I mean, for me, I don't, that south lot is not viable unless we're also talking about putting the Humboldt site in play and relocating, making a commitment to relocate Kairos. It's not, it's not viable. But if we include both of them, it is viable. But it also would require some trade-offs in the Jefferson design process in terms of, building a more vertical building and making sure there's enough room for
funds for that.
athletic.
Yeah, but so I guess I'm looking at, so I think I'm looking at it as, this goes to the community to make that decision on if this is something that we want, knowing what the trade-offs are, knowing what we will get or not get, as opposed to us making that decision, saying it's not viable. We're not in that, a lot of us are not in that community, not in that neighborhood. So I think having this information here, getting it back to the committee that we have to kind of look over this stuff here and having these community engagement conversations, and then having them decide if something is viable for them. I think that's probably the best way to go at this point.
Where is that, Gary, on this schematic? If is that happening? Is that this committee that you're referencing?
Yeah, that's part of it.
So they would be convening and looking at that criteria and making recommendations back.
How are they trying to do the community engagement piece? That'll be part of that, those sections there.
Would we consider Humboldt then as part of that potentially? If we're talking about that south lot?
Well, you have them on the list, so I think that's something that as they're looking at that, that's something to put to the community as well. Like, hey, this is what we're looking at. But I think we look like it got narrowed down to 5 spots, right? So I think we go back to them, and then this is part of the community piece, part of the site selection committee piece. Say, okay, this is what the trade-offs are. This is what it is. And then have them kind of decide, say, okay, this is going to work, this is not going to work. And then they come back to us and say, okay, this is what we think. And then we kind of make decisions there too. And it had to be pretty quick, because like I said, if it is going to be the south side of Plot of Jeff, then we want to get that to the master planning people for Jeff so we can kind of do all that work together. So it's going to have to get done in a timely fashion so we can line that up. But I think we need to get this information to them so they can have input on that, and then let us know what they recommend. Last question, we got to move on.
I'm just wondering, so there's the committee meeting, Shanice, you sent out the email for June 30th. Is that going to include the Center for Black Excellence Steering Committee and Jefferson Modernization, so we can actually start talking about it now?
What meeting is that, Shanice? Or what's up?
So she's referencing the site selection committee for Harriet Tubman. I know the Jefferson Modernization team and Center for Black Excellence team is coordinating right now. My assumption is that by the fall, that folks will be kind of ready to have that formal connection with the insight from the site selection committee on where we are now is still critical at the same time. So
And add to that, they have idea what they want to do for Tubman too already. So it's not like they ain't weighed in on what they thought, what their thoughts are.
Right, but I mean, it would be pretty helpful if we could actually hear, right, what their thoughts are at the site selection. Because I think that could really inform some of the decisions.
Yeah, well, not speaking for stuff, but from what I hear, that's outside of Jeff.
That's what we heard last time too. So
just put that out there. That's what they're looking at. So
that's great.
So, question just about timing.
So we gotta go.
So comes it.
We got 2 minutes. We got some other ones, so we can come back to this. This is at least to give some directions on where they need to go, what you guys need to do as far as this piece here.
Do you get what you need?
I was wondering, you said 5 sites.
Yeah, I just took off Emmanuel.
What about
okay.
Lloyd Center? So I
Take off
think
Lloyd
we kind
Center.
of taken that off as well.
But me, it's still.
Okay, so is Meek still on the list?
I guess I would ask, why are we not manual? We have the right.
Because
eminent-
we're not gonna-
Meeks is not served.
Yeah. That's a fight that I don't know if we really want to get into.
And it's,
And the
you have
commi- and the-
safety issues.
And the community not asking for that.
No.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Jefferson,
Okay.
what students in the Meek neighborhood are going to Harry Tubman Middle School?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What students that live in the Meek neighborhood are going to Harry Tubman Middle School? Historically.
Well, no, I agree, and that's a
It's-
question. But no, that's something that as the site selection committee get together, some of you guys can just take off the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can take it off the table. But I want you guys to be able to take that off the table.
Yeah.
I think
Not
we
us
took
taking
it
it
off
off
the
the
table.
table.
I think
Yeah.
we took it off the table a while ago.
Okay, well, I'll make sure about the next one, so we can start going through that piece.
Yeah.
Let's just take this off the table and move forward and start narrowing the stuff down.
Yeah,
All right,
also it's tiny.
okay, good, so kind of got the direction on that. We're gonna get this over to the site selection committee. We're gonna have a conversation with them. We'll try to narrow it. Hopefully they narrow it down some more to that. And then we said if it is, try to get the decision on where, at least what their recommendation is. If a couple of their recommendations is, say, as an example, if their recommendation is Meek, the South Side and Humboldt, then we'll start doing a list on those three, and then try to whittle it down faster. So if it end up being something that we need to align with the Jefferson Master Plan, then we can have access to do that. If not, then we can move on with just a single Tubman by itself. That's clear? All right. Next one, next to the.
I suggest we have our guests go next. Tom Peterson from the Accountability Committee.
Okay. I'll make it short since I'm running late.
Awesome.
And I was late too. For some reason, I had it at 4:30.
No worries.
And my co-chair informed me today that she was exposed to COVID over the weekend, so she chose to stay home, even though she doesn't have any symptoms. So it's just me tonight.
Always happy to see you.
Thanks. This was we only met once last quarter, so there's not a whole lot to report, which will make it easy for me to keep it brief. So primarily we focused on the 2017 Health and Safety Program and the 2020 infrastructure programs. Good news, 2017 Health and Safety Program is going great. I think you may have seen the memo that Marina sent you that kind of outlined summarized all the work that was done. That's a great success story. Some projects are well under budget, which are going to allow opportunities to approach other needs that we weren't sure, or always wasn't sure if they could. So all is well with health and safety. And I think the majority, if I'm not wrong, the majority of the health and safety program will be done this year. I think there'll be a few things carrying over into next year, but the majority of the work will be done this year. So kudos to the team on the health and safety program. On the infrastructure and capacity, those are still developing, and so they're starting to kick them off. There's a couple of categories that they're working on, HVAC, roofing projects, and so forth. But by the way they're approaching this in budgeting it, we're not really seeing all of the projects yet. So we're really not in a great position to say, yeah, they're meeting and attending the scope, schedule and budget for those because they're still developing. So we know that maybe the next time we meet, we'll have a better feel of what all those projects are going to be, what their scopes may be, budgets and schedules, and then the bond committee will be in a better position to say, yeah, they're meeting the objectives. And that one was, I think, done somewhat intentionally. They weren't really all that defined in the bond program. It was just a pot of money in a number of different categories that were going to be developed as the program evolved. And that's what they're in. But the good news is they're kicking it off. They're making, getting them identified. There's some projects that are some roofing projects and so forth that are underway. So that aspect of the 2020 program is they're moving forward. So more to come. Just two other notes that I wanted to share. Some of us got an opportunity to tour Lincoln, which was really, really nice. I really appreciate the opportunity to see that. It was fun for me to see it from its beginning. So, yeah, that's going to be a great facility. It's got some really nice amenities. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but appreciate the opportunity for that. Also, there was a meeting with some of the newer members of the BAC and OSM staff for them to kind of better understand how the program is being managed. So Marina and Dan had a chance to really kind of deep dive into the mechanics of how they manage the projects, how they approve changes, all those things. Really important. And I think it was really useful for the newer members to see that, to understand that they've got some really great processes in place that they're implementing to manage the program. So I think that was reassuring for them. For me, I already knew it, but I think I've been around for so long, I've seen it evolve. But it was good for the other communities to see that. We have just a couple of other recommendations. One, it's June and we still have two vacancies. And 6 months from now, I'm gone, and so it's another potentially another member. And to be honest, we haven't had great turnout in the last couple of meetings. There's only been a 4. So there really is a need to kind of figure out how we're going to fill those vacancies in the coming weeks. And
Shanice,
then,
can you maybe mention that to Jamal? Maybe we can get a little help from your team to do a little bit of outreach. Thanks.
yeah, and ideally, it would be useful to make sure they have some background and experience with capital construction. Don't necessarily need to have experience with schools, but some experience with how these projects are managed, how the design processes work, all these other things that we're primarily looking at will be useful in the candidates you're looking for.
Question on the candidates that have experience in capital construction. If someone from the construction industry wanted to be on there, would that preclude them from bidding on the projects as well?
That's always a delicate one, yes. I can't say, I think
There's a conflict of interest clause in the charter. I forget what it is offhand. I can send it to you because it has changed over time. So it's in there right now. But I can send it to you. But yeah, there is a conflict of interest component to it.
I don't leave it at that. That's for time.
All right, we got 5 minutes. What's the next one on the agenda? What?
Director Collins, I just wanted to know why you're deciding to do next, that we do have one person for public comment.
Okay, let's hear public comment. Thank you.
Safe routes to schools.
Try to do that.
Transportation.
Want it
Can we
fast?
do it?
We
Do it
could-
fast?
Yeah, I'd just like to give one quick update on safe routes to schools, not get into the supplemental transportation plan update, because that's gonna take a little more time, but we did get the ODOT grant, education grant for safe routes to
Awesome.
school money. So we will have a coordinator, we'll start recruiting for a full-time coordinator probably in August or September. And then have consultant money as well to develop a safe routes to school implementation.
Awesome.
Yeah, coming together.
Awesome.
That's great.
All right, so we'll move the supplemental transportation plan. update
Sorry about that.
To the next one. Works. Here's another comment.
Yes. We have, sorry. Lauren Bernstein.
That's me.
How's it going?
All right, how you doing?
So I'll go fast. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Oren Bernstein. I have 2 kids at Vernon K through 8, and I'm a mechanical engineer. Graduated from MIT 20 years ago. PPS did a great job measuring a bunch of the air cleaning and air exchange in all the schools in the system. And that evaluation highlighted a bunch of areas that were maybe below desirable rate of air cleaning exchange. And as you work to decide how to tackle and improve that air quality in the school system, I'd like to advocate for looking at the option of using a Corsi Rosenthal type air filter. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with it. These are simple devices. They consist of basically a high-grade furnace filter and a box fan or a like circulating floor fan. As counterintuitive as it might seem, they outperform all available commercial HEPA filters on an air clean per dollar basis, and even more surprisingly on an air clean per decibel basis. That is, they're more effective and they're also more quiet. This includes for smoke and for small particles like the droplets that carry COVID, but for sort of everything. This has been shown and tested at the University of California, Davis, and by the 3M Corporation, among other different places. I built several myself, given them to friends, and this is an example one that I built for my kids' classroom. It's just a couple filters, some cardboard, and like a standard
Wow,
fan.
that's awesome.
That's
awesome.
So they're probably, this one filter is probably doing more than if you turn both of other filters on here at full blast, which would be extremely loud. So just as a sense of the performance. And one simple step you could take is to explicitly allow and encourage their use in schools. The university or the California Department of Public Health did that. They put out a statement. That's just something simple you could do. You could also look at implementing a program to provide them across the school, or maybe just to teachers or schools that wanted them. This is probably the lowest cost way to get to 5 or 6 air changes per hour that you might want to most air quality experts recommend. And then you can feel free to reach out to me with questions. I'll try to send an email follow-up that has a little bit more information if you want it. And then if there's any advice you have, who to talk to or how to move forward.
So are similar ones commercially available?
There's some kits around. Most of them are sort of built from filters.
Like for do-it-yourself, basically?
Yeah.
So you could like order 500 of them?
You might be able to. I was trying, because I knew that was going to be an issue, I've been sort of doing it as a passionate side hobby. I've been trying to make it a thing you can order. And I've gotten pretty close with a team of other sort of volunteer engineers. We're not quite there yet. And it would probably have 4 filters instead of 2. And that would make it last the whole school year.
And all you're selling is the apparatus on the top and that fits on a regular fan, right?
Yeah, all you're
I mean,
selling.
they're not
yeah.
connected, you just cover it, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's just, it would be a kit that would let you, it's like, it'd be some cardboard that would let you put it all together in some tape.
What's the cost of it?
This is about $100 in material. You'd have like you probably want more fans for it to last a whole year. And then it would probably be, by the time you like put it all together or whatever, and then just like the work and the extensible parts, it'd probably be like 150, 200 for each one, I would guess. But, that's still way, way cheap, way cheaper than anything.
So like with the California, recommendation for including them, did they refer to a spec for them, or what are they actually referring to?
I can send you the exact phrasing from their recommendation, but it said something like it was like a statement about HEPA filters in general. It pointed towards not using HEPA filters with ionization or chemicals in them, and then said, but alternatively you could use one of these Corsi Rosenthal type options.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. Can you send me more information about that?
Absolutely.
You can send it to Dan and then he can get it out to us. I'm really interested to hear about what that could be and what that looks like.
Sure, of course.
Right, yes. Matter of fact, we can probably manufacture by Benson, right?
Yeah, seriously.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right,
Awesome.
do we have any other public comments? All right, anything else anyone need to urgently talk about? All right, well, we adjourn.